The first time I watched someone give up on a patient, it was 2 a.m, and the air in the trauma bay smelled like bleach and copper. I was 3 years into my job, still young enough to think every code could be turned around if you pushed hard enough. The man on the table was in his 50s car accident, chest cracked open, blood everywhere. The monitor stuttered in wild peaks and then slid flat, a thin green line across black glass. The attending stepped back, breath heavy behind his mask. Time of death 0214, he said. Yeah, he said. Someone hit the button to silence the alarm. The high-pitched scream cut off, leaving only the hiss of oxygen and the distant hum of vents. Outside rain slapped at the windows in a steady static-like rush. I stood frozen at the foot of the bed, gloves sticky, chest heaving. It felt like the room stopped moving too soon, like there was still one more thing we had not tried. Beside me, an older nurse started peeling off her gown. She noticed my face. "You did what you could, kid," she said. "We all did." "It felt fast, Yoram," I heard myself answer. She paused for a heartbeat, eyes flicking to the clock on the wall, then back to the body on the table. "You will get used to it," she said quietly. I nodded, but I did not believe her. I kept looking at the clock, at the second hand sweeping forward, and I knew I would remember that exact time long after the sheet was pulled over his face. Years later, I could still hear that silence whenever someone talked about letting go. Seattle rain has a way of filling every quiet space. It drums on roofs, hisses against wet asphalt, crawls down windows in thin, glowing rivers. That night it tapped on the windshield of my old minivan in an offbeat rhythm while the radio spat static over some late-night talk show. From the back seat, my daughter groaned. "Mom, your radio is cursed," Lily said. "Can we not listen to angry fuzz for once?" I reached out and nudged the dial until the static dropped to a softer whisper. "It is called atmosphere," I said. "Seattle tax." My son Evan sat behind me, hood-up, earbuds dangling around his neck without music. His eyes were on his phone, scrolling without really seeing. "You could move us somewhere it does not rain every day," he muttered. "We tried that," I said. "It came with a cheating firefighter and a foreclosure notice." He smirked despite himself. Lily snorted. "Sorry," I added. "Work with me here. I have an 8-hour shift ahead of me." We turned down a side street that cut through the industrial district. GPS said there was a faster route, but I killed the navigation out of habit. "You always turn that off," Lily said. "You know normal people just follow the blue line." "The blue line does not know these potholes," I replied. "The shortest way is not always the best way." We rolled to a stop in front of our building, a tired brick complex with iron balconies and a flickering lobby light. The rain had picked up, rattling against the windshield so hard it sounded like applause. Inside the apartment, everything smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. There were shoes kicked off by the door, textbooks spread over the kitchen table, a half-finished school project made of cardboard and glitter occupying the counter. I moved on autopilot. Leftovers into the microwave, lunches prepped, Post-it notes stuck to the fridge. There was a knock on the door. Mark stepped in without waiting for an invite, a paper bag in his hand, his hair damp from the rain. "I come bearing protein, Huel," he said, lifting the bag. "Real food, not vending machine cuisine." "You say that like vending machines are not valid." I answered, but I smiled. He kissed my cheek, warm and short, careful not to get too close to my scrub top. "How is the schedule?" he asked. "You on nights all week." 6 in a row, I said. "Harborview thinks I am a machine." "You are," he said, then added, "You ever think about doing something a little less brutal?" I leaned against the counter looking at him. Mark worked with his hands too, but his world was wood and nails projects that stayed where you put them. Mine came in on stretchers and sometimes left under sheets. "This is the only place I know how to be useful," I said. "Besides, I would just annoy you on your job site." He grinned. Lily snuck up behind us, grabbed fries from the bag, and vanished. Evan surfaced long enough to steal a container, mumble a thanks, and retreat to his room. Mark watched them. "They are worried about you," he said. "They are teenagers," I replied. "They are worried about everything." He knew better than to push. He squeezed my shoulder instead. "Text me if you get a break," he said. "I will pretend I am not already asleep." By the time I left the apartment, the rain had settled into a steady curtain. I walked to the car with my hood up, breath puffing in the cold air, keys clutched between my fingers. Harborview City Medical Center glowed in the distance, a pale block of light against the dark sky. The ER entrance was busy even at night. Ambulance lights reflected off wet pavement, streaks of red and white sliding over puddles. Inside, the smell hit me first. Antiseptic, coffee-stale air, a hint of something metallic that never quite went away. I clocked in, tied my hair back tighter, and stepped behind the nurse's station. The monitors along the wall hummed with green lines and numbers. In the waiting room, a TV murmured to no one in particular. "Monroe," someone called. I turned. Dr. Alan Reeves stood at the end of the hall, coffee in hand, glasses low on his nose. Up close, the lines around his mouth were deeper than when I had first met him. He had the look of a man who had spent most of his life under fluorescent lights. "Doctor," I said. He handed me a chart without preamble. Chest pain room 5, middle-aged smoker anxious, try to keep cardiology from losing their minds. "On it," I said. He was already walking away barking an order at a resident who had misread a lab value. The resident flinched, corrected himself, nodded too fast. Reeves did not slow down. "You are making friends again," Evelyn, our charge nurse, said under her breath as she passed by. "His charm is blinding," I replied. She smirked, then her face grew more serious. "By the way, admin sent another memo about protocol adherence," she said, tapping a red laminated sheet pinned to the corkboard. Hot topic. The sheet was impossible to miss. Bold letters, flow charts, boxes labeled with things like chain of command and authorization required. I stared at it for a moment. The memory of that old trauma bay flickered in my mind. The flat line, the quick call, the way everyone had stepped back without question. A new nurse fresh out of school hovered nearby with a tray of supplies. She glanced at the sheet, then at me. "I never know when it's okay to speak up," she said quietly. "Feels like there is always someone above me who knows better." I looked at her then, at the hall stretching out in both directions, rooms full of people who were counting on us whether they knew it or not. "If something feels wrong," I said, "you say it. That is part of your job too." She nodded, gripping the tray a little tighter. I picked up the next chart, listened to the rain hitting the windows, and moved toward the first room of the night. The first few hours of the shift passed in fragments. A chest pain that turned out to be heartburn and panic. A teenager with a broken wrist from a skateboard fall. An older woman with a blood pressure so high it made the monitor gasp. The rain never stopped. It washed the outside world in streaks of silver and turned the ER windows into dull mirrors. Every time I walked past the glass doors, I could hear it in the background, soft and constant, like static on an old television. Around midnight, the overhead speaker crackled to life. "Trauma team to Bay 2, incoming trauma, male 23 military, fall from training tower, estimated drop 25 feet, ETA 5 minutes. The words settled over the department like a weight. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Evelyn lifted her head from a chart and met my eyes. "That is ours," she said. I was already moving. Into the trauma bay. Check the airway cart. Check suction. Check the crash cart. The rhythm of preparation had been burned into my muscles years ago. Monitor on. IV lines ready. Blankets warmed. Lines. A resident hustled in blonde hair plastered to his forehead. "Tower fall, touche," he said, stating the obvious. "That is spinal until proven otherwise, right?" "Everything is spinal until proven otherwise," I answered, adjusting the bed height. "Just do not forget there is a whole person attached to the spine." Reeves appeared a moment later, flanked by another resident and a med student who looked like she should still be in high school. He peeled on a gown, snapped gloves over his wrists, and glanced at the clock. "Vitals," Heath asked. "Nothing yet," I said. "They are still en route." He nodded once, already somewhere inside his own mental checklist. The sound of the ambulance arrived before the vehicle itself, a low wail that grew louder, drowning out the TV and the low murmur of the waiting room. Red lights swept across the ceiling as the doors opened and the gurney rolled in, wet wheels squeaking on the tile. 4 people came with it. 2 paramedics, 1 combat medic in fatigues, 1 military officer in a soaked uniform. The patient on the gurney looked younger than my son. His hair was shaved close to his scalp. His face was pale beneath streaks of dried rain and blood. "Logan Hayes," the medic said, breathless. "Corporal, fall from tower during night training. Unwitnessed fall, found at the base, GCS fluctuating. He went out, came back, went out again." They swung the gurney over to our bed. We slid him across on the count of 3. His clothing had already been cut open in the field. His chest rose in shallow, fast breaths. His abdomen was swollen and tight. One leg lay at an angle that made my stomach clench. A pair of dog tags hung around his neck metal, catching the light as he moved. There were 2 tags on the chain, one engraved with his name, one with another name I could not see. They clicked softly against each other as he shifted. I attached the monitors. His heart rate flashed high and rapid. His blood pressure lagged behind numbers, dropping with every reading. His skin was cool and damp beneath my gloves. "Logan," I said, leaning close so my voice could cut through the chaos. "This is Claire. You are in the hospital. You took a bad fall, but we have you. Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. For a second, dark eyes met mine. They were startlingly clear. No confusion, just a worn-out kind of acceptance. "It is already done," he whispered. His lips barely moved. I had to lean even closer to catch the rest. Do not waste it. The words were wrong in the room. Everything in here was built around fighting, around dragging people back from edges. I felt a small jolt in my chest. Got an abdominal distension, possible spleen or liver, one of the residents called out. Pelvic instability, another added. Left femur, obvious deformity. Reeves put his hands on Logan's abdomen, fingers pressing gently, then more firmly. Logan did not flinch. That was not a good sign. Reeves's jaw tightened behind his mask. We are losing pressure, I said, keeping my voice steady. Systolic is down to 70. Get blood, Reeves ordered. 2 units O negative, prep for massive transfusion protocol. The team moved in tight circles. 1 person at the head managing the airway, 2 at the chest and abdomen, 1 at the legs. I worked around the edges, adjusting drapes, securing lines, wiping away blood that got in the way. The monitor beeped erratically, then settled into an uneasy rhythm. Numbers ticked downward. The room felt smaller with every beep. The combat medic stood near the doorway, helmet tucked under his arm, watching. His uniform was streaked with mud. His eyes flicked between Logan's face and Reeves's hands. He was conscious when we found him, the medic said. He kept saying it was fine, that we should not bother. Reeves did not answer. He checked the pupils with a flashlight, quick passes over each eye, then straightened. Probable intra-abdominal bleed, he said. Multiple fractures. He is circling the drain. We take him to the operating room like this, he arrests on the table, and we do not get him back. He looked up at the monitor one more time, then around at the team. Let us make him comfortable, he said. There was no drama in the words, no flourish. Just a decision delivered in the same tone he might use to order labs. The room shifted with it, shoulders relaxed, hands slowed. Someone lowered the lights a fraction. A vial of morphine appeared at my elbow. For a moment I did not move. Logan's eyes were half open, focused somewhere near the ceiling. His mouth twitched as if he wanted to say something, then relaxed. Are we calling it? The med student whispered. Not yet, Reeves said. But we are not going to torture him for a miracle. The phrase landed heavy in my chest. Torture. Miracle. I watched the numbers on the monitor. I watched the rise and fall of Logan's chest. The dog tags at his throat glinted as he breathed. Something in the pattern of his injuries nagged at me. I looked more closely at his skin. The bruising was deep along his left side, wrapping from his ribs toward his back. There were faint scrapes across one shoulder, but his face was almost untouched. No broken teeth, no obvious facial trauma. Tower falls were messy. They usually came with smashed faces, broken jaws, cracked eye sockets. This looked more like he had hit from the side or rolled, not gone straight down. I stepped to the head of the bed and lifted his eyelid again. Light, I said. One of the nurses angled the penlight so I could see. Logan's right pupil constricted briskly. The left one lagged. It did react, but slower, a thick, delayed response. Doctor, I said. Reeves was finishing a note on the chart pen, moving quickly. His pupils are asymmetrical, I said. Right is brisk, left is sluggish, and the bruising pattern is lateral. It does not look like a straight fall. We should get a head CT. He did not look up. He is bleeding out into his abdomen, Fifaz, he said. We do not have time for unnecessary imaging. If there is a subdural, it is not unnecessary, I answered. He is young. If we catch it, we could relieve the pressure. The abdominal bleed might be localized. He might have a shot. Now he did look at me. His eyes were sharp behind his lenses, the way they got when he was about to cut someone down to size. You are not a Surgeon Monroe, he said. You do not get to make that call. I'm not trying to, I said. I am telling you what I see. What I see is a patient whose body is already quitting, he replied. If we drag him through scans and hallways and prep and he codes on the way, what did we do except make his last hour hell? Around us the room had settled into a strange quiet. Not the quiet of peace, but the careful quiet of people trying not to choose sides. The morphine was in the line, now clear liquid disappearing into the tubing. Logan's shoulders eased as it reached him. His lips moved again. I leaned closer. Do not, he whispered. Do not fight it. I straightened, heart pounding. For a moment the sounds of the room dropped away. All I could hear was the rain hitting the roof, the faint tap of drops on glass, the muffled hiss of the oxygen. The memory of that old trauma bay flooded back, the flat line, the quick call, the older nurse telling me I would get used to it. I knew I had not. Without quite realizing I was doing it, I took a step back from the bed. Then another. My gloves squeaked as I peeled them off. No one stopped me. They were all watching Logan. No one watched me walk out of the trauma bay. In the hallway, the light felt harsher. I braced a hand on the cool wall and drew in a breath that tasted like disinfectant and stale coffee. Through a narrow window, I could see rain sliding down the glass outside, lines of water crossing, merging, breaking apart. The overhead speaker called a code somewhere else in the hospital. Someone laughed in the nurse's station, the sound thin and forced. I stared down the corridor that led toward radiology. My pulse thudded in my ears loud as any alarm. I pushed off the wall and started walking. Not fast, not slow, just enough to keep myself from thinking too hard. The corridor to radiology felt longer than usual, lined with posters about stroke signs and early detection. In any other moment, they would have been background noise. Tonight, they felt like judges. At the far end near the elevators, there was a phone mounted on the wall. I picked up the receiver and punched in the extension for radiology with fingers that were a little too tight. The line rang twice. "Night radiology," a calm voice answered. "Sun speaking." "Dr. Sun, this is Claire Monroe in the ER," I said. My voice sounded steady, at least to my own ears. "We have a trauma patient from the base. 23 fall, from height, unstable vitals, suspected abdominal bleed. He is showing asymmetrical pupils and a lateral bruising pattern. I need an emergent head CT." A brief pause crackled through the line. "Was this ordered by Dr. Reeves?" she asked. I glanced back down the hallway in the direction of the trauma bay, even though I could not see it from here. "He is the attending on the case," I said. "We need a second look. It fits criteria for a head CT under the trauma protocol." "Claire," she said, a hint of apology in her tone, "you know I am supposed to have an order." "I know what he is supposed to have too," I said. "A chance. He is full code, no DNR, no withdrawal of care order. Pupils uneven, possible subdural. If I send him up and I am wrong, I will own that. If I do not send him and I am right, we both know what happens." There was another pause. I could hear the faint hum of machines on her end. "Transfer him now," she said at last. "I will alert my tech." The line clicked dead. I stayed there for a second, listening to my own breath. Then I hung up and went back. Inside the trauma bay, the energy had shifted again. It was quieter, but not entirely peaceful. The morphine had done its work. Logan's jaw had unclenched. His breathing came a little easier. The monitor still did not like what it was seeing. Evelyn looked up when I stepped inside. "Where did you go?" she asked. "Radiology," I said. "We are getting a head CT." For a split second, her eyes widened. Then she masked it. "Did Reeves sign off?" she asked low. "We are within protocol," I said. It was not a lie exactly. It just leaned heavily on one interpretation of the rules. 2 transport techs were at the door with a portable monitor and oxygen tank. "Bay 2 right?" one of them asked. "Yes," I said. "He needs to go now. He is still full code." They moved in, disconnecting what they could, swapping lines to portable equipment. Logan's dog tags swung as we shifted him, the metal clinking against the bed rail. As they rolled him out, Reeves stepped back into the bay. He stopped so abruptly his coffee sloshed in its cup. "Where are you taking him?" he asked, voice hard. "Head CT," I said. "Radiology is ready." He stared at me for a second. That felt longer than it was. "I did not authorize that," he said. "You have not withdrawn care," I said. "He still qualifies for diagnostic imaging." "This is not a debate," he snapped. "Turn him around." The transport techs froze, looking between us. Logan lay on the gurney, eyes closed, lips slightly parted. The monitor on the portable unit beeped a shaky rhythm. "Doctor," I said, meeting his gaze. "His pupil response is abnormal. If he has a subdural, we need to know. If I'm wrong, we have lost 10 minutes. If I'm right, we have a surgical target and a better understanding of what is killing him." The room seemed to draw tighter around us. The residents watched without moving. The med student gripped her clipboard, knuckles white. The combat medic stood with his helmet under his arm, jaw clenched. "You have put this hospital at risk," Reeves said. "You do not get to decide when we break protocol because you feel something in your gut." "Then call radiology and cancel it," I said. "Tell them not to scan the patient whose nurse is begging you to look at his brain." His nostrils flared. For a heartbeat, I thought he might actually do it. Instead, he let out a long breath through his teeth. "Fine," he said. "Get your scan. But this is on you." He stepped aside. The transport techs did not wait for him to change his mind. They pushed Logan out into the hall, the wheels leaving faint, wet tracks on the tile where his clothing had dripped. I went with them. Radiology was colder than the ER. The air carried a faint chemical smell and the quiet hum of heavy machinery. The CT suite looked almost peaceful, a rounded white machine in a dim room, lights low for the screens. Dr. Sun stood by the console, arms folded, dark hair pulled back in a loose knot. She gave me a quick nod, then focused on the patient. Logan Hayes, I said. 23. Tower fall, suspected intra-abdominal bleed, unstable vitals, uneven pupils. All right, she said. Let us get this done. We shifted him onto the CT table. His skin felt cooler than before. I adjusted the oxygen mask and smoothed the sheet over his chest. His eyes did not open. Logan, I said close to his ear. This is Claire again. We are taking pictures of your head. Try to stay still. The scanner whirred to life, the ring moving into place. The table slid into the circular opening, the machine making its low mechanical sounds as it captured slice after slice of his brain. From behind the glass, I watched the images blossom on the screen, bit by bit. Gray and white, shadows and light. Dr. Sun leaned forward, expression sharpening. Come here, she said. I stepped into the control room. My stomach tightened as I saw what she was seeing. There, on the left side of the scan, was a crescent of darker density pressed between skull and brain. It hugged the contour of the bone, pushing the midline of his brain off-center. Subdural hematoma, she said. Significant mass effect, left side. This did not bleed out slowly. It is active. My finger traced the edge of the shadow on the screen hovering just above the image. And his abdomen, I asked. You saw the field scans from the unit. They sent over a quick abdominal fast, she said, clicking to another view. Looks like the main source is the spleen. There is blood, but it is not exploding. If he makes it through surgery, he has a shot. This is the bigger threat. She tapped the image of the brain. I let out a breath I had been holding without knowing it. Can you print those? I asked. She printed the key slices and handed them to me, still warm from the machine. Claire, she said, voice softer. This is the right call medically. The rest is above my pay grade. Thank you, I said. In the hall, the transport techs were already hooking Logan back up to the portable monitor. As we started to move, the monitor alarm went off. The heart rate number spiked and then dropped. The line on the screen wobbled, then flattened into a straight, unforgiving strip. He is bradying down, one of the techs said. We lost pulse. I checked. No carotid, no femoral. Just empty space where there should have been life. Code blue, I said, already climbing onto the side rail. Right here, now. The tech hit the code button on the wall. The alarm echoed down the corridor. I planted my hands on Logan's sternum and started compressions. The cartilage under my palms gave, with each push, ribs, grinding his body, jerking with the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, I counted under my breath. 5, 6, 7, 8. Airway arrived, bringing a bag and mask. Someone threw a backboard under the mattress. The portable monitor continued its flat tone, a continuous scream. By the time we shoved him back through the doors of the trauma bay, a full code team had formed. Nurses, residents, the respiratory therapist. Reeves pushed through them, eyes going straight to the monitor. What happened to Uwe? He demanded. He crashed in CT, I said between compressions. We have a confirmed left subdural with mass effect and probable splenic bleed. We need to get him to the operating room. No rhythm, no pressure, someone called out. We are still in a systole. Sweat trickled down my back. My arms burned. The bones under my hands felt fragile, like I could push right through them if I was not careful. Reeves stood at the foot of the bed. His hands were still. His gaze moved from the flat monitor to the CT films clutched in my left hand to my face. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were the alarm, my counting, and the rain outside. Doctor, I said, my voice low but hard. Do not call it. Not yet. Our eyes locked. The last time I had heard those words in my own head, I had been the one staying silent. This time, I was the one who refused to. Reeves swore under his breath. The decision flashed across his face. Prepare the OR. OR, he said sharply. Page neurosurgery, page general. We are going to do this. Keep compressions going until anesthesia is ready to take over. The room exploded back into motion. Orders flew, hands moved. The crash cart was shoved closer. Medications were drawn and pushed. Airway secured a tube. The respiratory therapist squeezed the bag with steady, practiced hands. We rolled Logan down the hall toward the elevators, me still on the rail, still pressing on his chest in a relentless rhythm. Each pump sent a faint wave through his body, a mechanical echo of a heartbeat. In the operating theater, bright lights washed everything in sharp whites and shadows. We transferred him to the table. Anesthesia took over compressions, then switched to internal control as lines were placed, drugs pushed, machines connected. Reeves scrubbed in without a word. His movements were quick and clipped all business. Another surgeon arrived, the neurosurgeon on call, eyes already focused on the scans that had been rushed up ahead of us. I stayed as the scrub nurse hands, gloved gown, tied instruments lined in neat rows. The neurosurgeon worked first to opening the left side of Logan's skull, evacuating the dark, clotted blood that had been compressing his brain. The smell of bone dust and cautery mixed with the ever-present antiseptic. I watched the monitor. With every milliliter they removed, the pressure readings eased. The line steadied. When they closed the dura and replaced the bone, Reeves took over the abdomen. He opened the distended belly, and a rush of dark blood filled the suction canister. The spleen was torn but not shredded. He packed, clamped, stitched. His hands did not shake, not where it counted. Hours blurred into one another, marked only by the steady cadence of machines and the soft exchanges of the surgical team. At last, the incisions were closed, dressings applied. The monitors were no longer screaming. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, all tenuous but present. "How is he?" I asked quietly. "Alive here," anesthesia answered. "For now, that is as much as anyone gets." We wheeled him toward the elevator that would take him to the ICU. His face was almost peaceful under the tape and tubes, the dog tags, resting against a clean sheet instead of bare skin. When the doors closed on him, the adrenaline that had been carrying me began to leak away. I stepped back from the elevator, one hand catching the wall. My legs felt hollow. My gloves were streaked with dried blood. The sounds of the hospital floated around me in pieces. A distant overhead page, a cart rattling past. The rain still falling somewhere beyond the concrete and glass. I slid down onto a bench outside the operating room and lowered my head into my hands. Air moved in and out of my lungs on a slow delay, as if my body was catching up to what had just happened. We had kept him alive. The rest of it would not be that simple. 2 days blurred by in a tired loop of charting vitals and the same questions from different mouths. Did you really send him to CT without an order? Is he going to make it? Do you think Reeves is going to let that slide? I answered almost none of them. On the second morning, when the sky outside the hospital windows was the color of dishwater and the rain had softened to a mist, I got a message on my work phone. "Please report to Human Resources, 10 minutes. The Office for HR and Risk Management was on a floor that never saw patients. The carpet was too clean. The walls were lined with framed photos of nurses at award ceremonies smiling under bright lights, hair-perfect uniforms pressed. A woman from Risk Management sat at the end of a polished table, a tablet in front of her. Next to her was a man in a tie with a hospital badge that said Legal Affairs. Evelyn was there too, hands folded in her lap. She did not look at me when I walked in. "Claire, thank you for coming," the woman began. Her voice had the practiced calm of someone who delivered bad news regularly. "Please have a seat." I sat. The chair was softer than any we had in the ER. It did not help. "We are here to review an incident that occurred during your last shift, she said. Specifically, the decision to transfer patient Logan Hayes to radiology for a head CT without documented authorization from the attending physician. Her words were clinical, the edges of them still cut. "I called radiology," I said. "I requested the scan. He was full code. His pupil response was abnormal. It was within trauma protocol. The concern the man in the tie said, "is not whether your clinical suspicion was correct. The concern is that your actions could be interpreted as insubordination and a breach of the chain of command. You put the hospital at potential legal risk," the woman added. "If the outcome had been different, we could be facing serious liability." "The outcome is that he is alive," I said. I did not raise my voice, but it came out flatter than I intended. A silence stretched across the table. "No one is ignoring that," the man said. "However, we have to look at the process as well as the result." They outlined what would happen next. Formal review, documentation of a policy violation, close monitoring of my charting and clinical decisions, meetings, possible disciplinary actions depending on the findings. "Do you understand?" the woman asked. "I understand that you wrote all of this before you asked me what I saw in that room," I said. Evelyn shifted in her chair. The legal man's jaw tightened. "You will receive the paperwork by the end of the week," the woman said. For now, you may continue to work, but we ask that you adhere strictly to authorization protocols. Any further deviations will be taken very seriously. They dismissed me with a polite nod. In the elevator back down, Evelyn and I stood shoulder to shoulder watching the numbers light up and dim as we dropped. I tried to talk them down, she said quietly. They are spooked. By what? I asked. That I was right? By the idea that nurses might start making calls like that without cover, she said. You know how they think. I did. That did not make it easier to swallow. The ER felt different after that. The same patients came through the same codes, the same tired relatives in plastic chairs, but the air had changed. Conversations cut off when I walked into the break room. Smiles slipped away a little too fast. A couple of nurses still met my eyes more than before, actually. They were newer, younger. There was something like curiosity in their faces and something like respect. Others avoided me altogether. Reeves did not speak to me unless he had to. Orders came through other nurses when possible. When we were in the same room, he kept his focus on the monitor, on the patient, on anything that was not me. He shifted my assignments when he could. Fewer traumas, more fast tracks. Coughs, minor injuries, dehydration. Things that did not bleed out on the floor. At home, the shift clung to me. I scrubbed my hands in the kitchen sink as if I could rinse off the hospital smell. The water ran hot and harsh over my skin. Mom, Evan said one night at dinner, pushing noodles around his bowl, are they going to fire you? Lily shot him a glare. You are not subtle, she said. It is a fair question, he replied. I put my fork down. They are looking at what happened, I said. They have to. That is their job. Is what you did wrong? Lily asked. I thought of Logan on the table. His eyes, his words, the image of his brain on the CT screen, the line on the monitor flattening in the hallway, the surgeons pulling him back one slice at a time. I did what I thought was right for my patient, I said. That is my answer. Evan leaned back in his chair. The expression on his face was too old for 16. Dad says hospitals are all about covering their own ass, he said. He said you should watch your back. Lily kicked him under the table. He did not react. Your dad does not work where I work, I said. He does not get a say in this. Later, when the kids were in their rooms, Mark came by with a six-pack and a look that tried to be casual. How bad is it? He asked after I let him in. They wrote me up, I said. Formal review, meetings, paperwork. But you saved him, Mark said. That Marine kid. His name is Logan, you say, please? Logan, I said. And yes, for now. He frowned. I do not get it, he said. You do your job. You keep someone from dying. They punish you. That makes no sense. It makes sense to the people who care about protocols more than faces, I replied. They think if they let me slide, the next time someone else breaks a rule and a patient dies, they will be blamed for not keeping the lid on. So, what do you do? He asked. I opened the fridge and put the beer inside without taking one. I go to work, I said. I take care of the people in front of me. I wait. The days ticked by. I checked the ICU board whenever I passed. Hayes, Logan, room 412, status critical then guarded. A little under a week after the surgery, I walked past the ICU on my way to drop off labs. The glass doors were closed, the hall dim, and quiet monitors beeping from behind drawn curtains. As I passed room 412, a movement caught my eye. The bed inside was angled toward the window. The blinds were partly open, letting in a washed-out gray light. On the bed, propped slightly upright, Logan was awake. He looked smaller sitting up the hospital gown, too big for his shoulders. There was a bandage wrapping the left side of his head, an IV line in his arm, a monitor at his shoulder. His eyes were open, wandering the room with the slow caution of someone who did not quite trust what he was seeing. I stopped without thinking. Through the glass, his gaze slid across the hallway and landed on me. He blinked, squinted, then lifted a hand in a small, uncertain gesture. I pushed the door open. The air inside was cooler. It smelled like antiseptic and plastic and the faint sweetness of whatever was running in his IV. Hey, I said gently, you are up. Yeah, he rasped. His voice sounded like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. There was a thin tube running under his nose, feeding him oxygen. So they tell me. He looked at me for a long moment. You are the nurse from the rain, he said. I could not help the brief smile that pulled at my mouth. That is one way to describe my job, I said. I am Claire. Logan? He said automatically, then frowned. You already knew that. I did, I said. How are you feeling? Like I fell off a tower, he said. And then a truck hit me, and then the truck backed up out of guilt. It was a rough joke, but it was a joke. That was something. Your brain took a hit, I said. Your spleen too. They fixed what they could. He shifted his gaze to the monitor, then to the window. I remember the rain, he said, on my face, on the ground, in the ambulance. He swallowed, winced a little. I heard someone say it was not worth it, he added. That it was already done. His voice was flat. There was no accusation in it, just memory. In the trauma bay, I said, things looked bad. He turned his head back to me. The movement was careful. I told you not to waste it, he said. I remember saying that. You did, I said. Why did you not listen, he asked. The question was simple. It landed like a weight. I pulled the chair from the corner closer to his bed and sat down. Because I did not think it was a waste, I said. Because I saw something that said you had a chance. Because you are 23 and no one had any right to decide you were done. He looked at me, and for a moment the joking facade dropped. Underneath it there was something raw. You do not know what I did, he had. He said. Then you can tell me, I replied. He let his head fall back against the pillow. His hand went to his chest, fingers brushing the dog tags that had been tucked under the gown. They were training reps, he said. We used to do them in sleep, ready, move, clear. The night in Afghanistan, that is what it felt like. Just another patrol, until it was not. His voice drifted a little. His eyes went unfocused. We walked into an open stretch, he said. I was point. Mason was behind me. He was laughing about something. I do not even remember what. There was a flash, a sound like the world ripping. I hit the dirt, ears ringing, could not feel my hands. He inhaled slowly. When I looked back, he said, he was on the ground, he was not moving. There was nothing wrong with me, not a scratch. His fingers tightened around the dog tag. I kept thinking they had made a mistake, he said. That some clerk somewhere had swapped our names. That I was walking around in a life that was not mine. I listened. The only sounds were his voice and the soft beep of the monitor. I came home, so he said. Everyone said I was lucky. They shook my hand. They told me Mason would be proud. He laughed, a short, bitter sound that turned into a cough. I started climbing everything higher than it needed to be, he continued. Pushing runs longer, taking corners faster. Figured if something gave out, if a rope slipped, if a tire blew, it would make sense. It would even the score. His eyes met mine again. The night on the tower, he said. I did not jump. I did not plan it like a movie. I just stopped caring how careful I was. I let my hand relax on the rope. I went through the motions, but I did not care if they worked. He exhaled. When I was lying there, Kit, he said, and I heard someone say it was already done, I felt relief, like finally the universe had caught up. He was quiet for a long time after that. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. The monitor traced each one. Then I woke up here, Yukiso, he said softly, with this thing in my arm and this bandage on my head, and someone telling me I made it. And for the first time in months, I was not sure how I felt about that. I sat with that. You know what I remember, I said after a while. I remember looking at your eyes and thinking they did not match your body. Your body was giving up. Your eyes were not. They were tired. They were something, but they were not gone. He studied my face as if weighing the truth of that. They are talking about it, you know, he said at last. On the floor, the guy in the room next to me said some nurse broke all the rules for me. A lot of people have opinions about what happened, I said. What do you think, he asked. I held his gaze. I think you are here, I said. And what you do with that is up to you. Outside the window, the clouds were thinning. The rain had slowed to a faint drizzle, beads of water clinging to the glass like tiny lenses. In them, the hospital lights were reflected in miniature flickering but still on. Word about Logan traveled faster than any memo. On breaks, I heard my name in conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Sometimes they did not stop fast enough. In psych, they are already talking about him, one nurse said in the break room, not realizing I was on the other side of the divider. About whether he wanted to die. They are talking about Claire too, another answered. About how she dragged him into surgery anyway. Dragged him into living, someone else muttered. I poured coffee and pretended I could not hear. The more awake Logan became, the more complex the story grew. A corpsman told someone that he had been reckless in training long before the fall. A physical therapist mentioned that he pulled away when anyone called him lucky. The hospital loved clean narratives. This one was not clean. A week after my meeting with Human Resources, I got another message on my work phone. Please report to Conference Room B Ethics Committee review. My throat went dry reading it. The union representative met me outside the room. His name was Harris, a compact man with tired eyes and a tie that had seen better days. He carried a folder stuffed with papers, tabs sticking out in different colors. Claire, he said, offering a quick, firm handshake, you holding up? Defining terms would take too long, I said. He gave the smallest smile. Fair, he said. Here's the situation. They have your file, they have Reeves's complaint, they have the chart, the CT report, the operative notes. They also have the preliminary summary from HR. Which says what? I asked that I am a liability with a stethoscope. It says you bypassed an attending on a critical decision, he replied, not sugarcoating it, and that your choice altered the course of care. That is the point, I said. I know, he said. Listen, ethic committees do not love gray areas. They like apologies. They like people who say they will never do it again. He opened the folder and slid a paper toward me. If you go in there and tell them you are sorry for stepping out of line, that you understand the chain of command and you will follow it, we can probably get this down to a temporary suspension, maybe just a formal reprimand. And if I do not say I'm sorry, I asked, then you are asking them to validate your judgment against an attending's public record, he said. They will be weighing wood against the structure that keeps this place from falling apart. They do not do that lightly. He watched my face. I'm not here to tell you what to do, he said. I am here to tell you what it costs. I thought of Logan sitting in his ICU bed, fingers on his dog tags. I thought of the student nurse at the board asking when it was all right to speak up. I thought of the flat green line on that old monitor, the quick call in the dead of night. If I apologize, I said slowly, I am saying that saving him that way was wrong. You are saying you understand you scared the people who sign your checks, he replied. That is not the same thing, I said. We stood in silence for a moment. Finally, he sighed. Then go in there and tell them why you did what you did, he said. Use clinical language. Stay away from words like instinct and gut. Those make administrators itch. Conference room B was colder than it needed to be. A long table, a pitcher of water, neatly arranged notepads. 5 people sat on one side. A senior internist, a psychiatrist, a nurse administrator I had seen at award ceremonies but never spoken to, a lawyer from the hospital, a woman with gray hair and no badge, who I assumed was the community representative. Reeves sat in a chair near the end posture, straight hands folded. They had placed a chair for me opposite them. Ms. Monroe, the internist said, thank you for coming in. We would like to discuss the events surrounding the care of patient Logan Hayes. Reeves presented his account first. It was stripped of emotion, packed with terms and timelines. He described Logan's injuries, his vital signs, the likelihood of massive intra-abdominal hemorrhage. He described in careful detail the risk of moving an unstable patient through the hospital for imaging. He spoke about precedent, about the need for a unified chain of command in crisis, about the danger of undermining the authority of the attending physician. He did not raise his voice. He did not call me names. If anything, he sounded tired. To be clear, the psychiatrist asked at one point, at the time you believed continued aggressive intervention was futile. In my judgment, yes, Reeves said. The cost and suffering and resources outweighed the chance of survival. And you communicated that to your team, she asked. I did, he said. The nurse administrator made a note. When they turned to me, my mouth felt dry. Ms. Monroe, the internist said, can you walk us through what you observed at the bedside that night? I told them. I talked about the bruising pattern, the lack of facial trauma, the lateral impact that did not match a straight fall. I described Logan's pupils right, brisk left delayed, and the concern that raised in every trauma training I had ever done. I described the call to radiology, the scan, the image on the screen, the crescent of blood pressing his brain across the midline, the torn spleen that was ugly but not beyond repair. What did you understand the risk to be when you moved him to radiology? The lawyer asked. That he could decompensate in transit, I said. Which he did. We coded him in the hallway and continued compressions back into the bay. And you still believe that was the correct risk to take, he said. He said. Yes, I said. The psychiatrist leaned forward. You were aware at that time that he had expressed statements suggesting he was ready to die, she said. The do not waste it comments. The acceptance. I heard him say those things, I said. I also saw a 23-year-old with no advance directive, no psychiatric evaluation, and a reversible injury in his head. So you did not consider the possibility that he might have been expressing a wish not to be resuscitated, she asked. I considered the possibility that he was in shock, I said, that he was frightened, disoriented, and maybe tired of hurting. I did not consider that an informed decision to die. The community representative watched me closely. What about now? She asked. Knowing what you know about his history, about his survivor guilt. I thought of Logan's voice describing the dust and light in Afghanistan, the way his friend had fallen, the way he had walked away untouched. If someone with his history came into the ER and calmly repeatedly asked not to be resuscitated after evaluation and discussion, that would be a different conversation, I said. That night he did not have that. He had a broken body and a brain being squeezed inside his skull. The nurse administrator flipped through the CT images in the file. With the benefit of hindsight, she said, Your clinical judgment appears to have been accurate. The question before us is whether your method of acting on that judgment was acceptable within our framework. Harris cleared his throat. If I may, he said, we would also like to submit a statement from Mr. Hayes, written with his consent. All eyes shifted to him. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his folder and handed it to the internist. I will read it aloud, the internist said. The letter was written in Logan's uneven handwriting, the ink pressing hard in some places, lighter in others. His words were simple, no legal phrases, no medical terms. He talked about Mason, about coming home in a body that felt like a stolen uniform, about the training accidents that were not quite accidents, about the moment in the trauma bay when he heard that it might be over and felt a kind of peace. Then he described waking up in the ICU with his head wrapped and his chest aching and realizing that someone had refused to let that be the end. She did not just keep my heart beating, the letter read. She gave me a chance to want that heartbeat again. The room was quiet when the internist finished. The only sound was the faint shush of his hand smoothing the paper. Reeves stared at the table. His jaw moved once a restrained clench. The community representative spoke first. Sergeant Hayes credits Nurse Monroe's actions with his survival, she said. He acknowledges his mental state at the time was impaired by trauma and depression. That carries weight, at least with me. The lawyer shifted in his seat. We cannot ignore the liability implications, he said. If we are seen to endorse independent actions outside the chain of command, we open ourselves to chaos and critical care. We also cannot ignore the data, the internist replied. Without the scan, we would likely have missed a treatable brain bleed. The nurse administrator looked between Reeves and me. The relationship between nurses and physicians requires trust in both directions, she said. This case shows what happens when that breaks down. They asked a few more questions, small details, points of clarification. Then the internist folded his hands. Thank you, Dr. Reeves, he said. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. We will confer privately and communicate our findings to both of you. We were dismissed. Outside in the glare of the hallway lights, the air felt thin. Reeves and I stepped out of the room at the same time. For a moment, we stood there side by side watching people in scrubs hurry past. He spoke first. You made me look like an idiot in there, he said. His tone was flat. There was no heat in it, just an exhausted fact. You did that yourself when you stopped looking at him as someone you could still help, I said. He winced barely. You are not the only one who has watched a young man die because we pushed too hard, he said. It does something to you, makes you cautious in ways you do not always admit. I know, I said. We stood there caught between understanding and something more stubborn. He shook his head once and walked away. I stayed where I was until Harris came out a few minutes later. Well, he said that could have gone worse. Could it have gone better? I asked. He shrugged. They are in a room arguing whether you are a dangerous outlier or an uncomfortable reminder that nurses notice things, he said. Give them time. I nodded. He patted my shoulder once, then left. I walked down to the first floor and found an empty stretch of hallway near a stairwell. There was a small window there looking out over the city. The rain had started again, fine threads drifting past the glass, blurring the lights of Seattle into soft pools of color. I rested my forehead lightly against the cool pane and closed my eyes. Waiting had never felt so loud. The decision came down 3 days later. I was in the middle of starting an IV on a dehydrated college kid when my phone buzzed. Brief message. Ethics Committee findings available. Please report to administration. The walk-up felt shorter this time. Maybe I was simply too tired to stretch it out in my head. The same room, the same table. Fewer papers this time. The internist, the nurse administrator, the lawyer, the psychiatrist, and the community representative sat where they had sat before. Ms. Monroe, the internist began. Thank you for coming. I took my seat and waited. We have reviewed the events surrounding the care of patient Logan Hayes, he said. We considered documentation from Human Resources testimony from Dr. Reeves and yourself, the radiology and operative reports, and the letter Mr. Hayes submitted. He glanced at his notes. We concluded that your decision to request diagnostic imaging without explicit authorization from the attending physician constituted a deviation from established chain of command, he continued. As such, a formal written warning will be placed in your personnel file. The words landed like a small stone in my stomach, expected, still unpleasant. However, he went on, we also concluded that your clinical assessment was sound and that obtaining the head CT was medically appropriate under the circumstances. The complaint regarding gross negligence has been dismissed. No suspension will be issued. The nurse administrator cleared her throat. We will be recommending additional training for both physicians and nursing staff regarding collaborative decision-making in trauma situations, she said. We need stronger channels for nurses to raise concerns without feeling they must act alone. The community representative spoke last. There is risk in what you did, Pisios, she said. There is also risk in a culture where the person at the bedside feels they cannot speak when they see something life-threatening. You live at that line. It is not a comfortable place. The lawyer added a few sentences about documentation liability expectations. None of them changed the shape of what had already been said. Do you have any questions? The internist asked. I shook my head. No, I said. I heard you. They dismissed me. As I stood, the nurse administrator caught my eye. Claire, she said softer, you might consider applying for the clinical council next year. We need people who notice patterns. I did not answer. I nodded once and left. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. The warning sat in my file like a smudge on an otherwise clean page. It did not change my pay. It did not change my badge. It changed the way some people looked at me. Reeves remained cool, but the edge of open hostility faded. Orders stopped going around me. He still preferred short sentences and firm endings, but now when I brought up an abnormal lab or a worrying trend in a patient's vitals, he listened a little longer before answering. Some of the older nurses kept their distance. The younger ones did not. They started asking me to double-check their assessments, to read EKGs with them, to talk through cases that did not sit right. On nights when the board was full and the alarms did not stop, there was not much time for anything but moving from room to room. On quieter nights, I would sometimes find a new nurse by the protocol board, standing under the red laminated rules, reading like she was cramming for an exam. One evening, I noticed a girl with a ponytail and tired eyes staring up at it, brows knitted. Learning the commandments, I said. She jumped a little, then laughed. Feels like if I breathe wrong, someone will cite policy 17-point-something at me, she said. I looked at the board at the flowcharts at the boxes about reporting structures and authorizations. They write these for worst-case scenarios, I said. They forget that most of our job is seeing who is in front of us. She swallowed. What if I see something and the doctor says it is nothing? She asked. Do I just let it go? Document what you saw, I said. Say it again. If it still does not sit right, say it to someone else. You are not a spectator. You are part of the team. Act like it. She nodded slowly. Her shoulders eased a little. On the ICU board, Hayes stayed on the list for a long time. Critical, then serious, then stable. One day, his name moved to the rehab floor. Eventually, it disappeared. The morning he was discharged, I found him in the cafeteria. He sat at a table near the window, a paper cup of coffee in front of him untouched. He wore jeans and a sweatshirt with the hospital logo sleeves pushed to his elbows. The bandage on his head was gone, replaced by a pale scar that cut a small line through his hair. Thought you would be sleeping through breakfast, I said, as I pulled out the chair across from him. He grinned only a little crooked. They woke me up every hour for a week, he said. Now my body thinks that is the only way to live. There were crutches leaning against the table, but his hands were free. One of them rested near his dog tags, which lay on the plastic tray beside the coffee. You look different sitting up, I said. Less dead. I feel less dead, Bo, he replied. Turns out being alive hurts in more places. We sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, watching staff cross the room trays in hand, badges swinging. They are discharging me today, Wakakik, he said. Back to base, then out processing. You are leaving the Marines, I said. He nodded. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I was a lifer, he said. Now I'm trying on the idea that I'm allowed to stop. Do you know what you want to do yet? I asked. He looked down at his hands. There is a counselor that has been coming by, he said. He works with vets. I did not think talking would help, but he did not talk like a brochure. I kind of like the way he listens. He hesitated, then lifted his gaze. I have been thinking, Shay, he said. Maybe I could do that. Go back to school, learn how to sit in a room with guys who feel like I did, and not say stupid things to them. That sounds like a useful job, Sik, I said. I figure I owe Mason more than a name on a tag, Ewo, he answered. He picked up the chain and let the two pieces of metal rest on his palm. One said Hayes Logan. The other had Mason's name stamped into it, a letter slightly worn. I used to think the only way to make it fair was to stop, he said, to punch out early. He rolled the tags between his fingers. Now I am trying this instead, he said. See if it feels any less like stealing. He took a breath, then extended his hand toward me. Here, he said. I want you to have this one. He slid Mason's tag off the chain and held it out. I stared at it. I cannot take that, I said. You already did, he said. The night you refused to let me quit. This just catches up the paperwork. The metal was cool against my skin when I took it. It had weight out of proportion to its size. I do not know what I am supposed to do with it, I said. Maybe nothing, he said. Maybe just remember there is at least one idiot out there who is glad you did not follow orders. I curled my fingers around the tag. Fair enough, I said. They called his name over the intercom then. Discharge processing. He stood leaning on the crutches and looked at me one more time. Thank you, he said, for fighting when I would not. I did not have an answer that did not sound too small. I settled for a nod. He maneuvered away out of the cafeteria into a future that was not completely written yet. I tucked the dog tag into the inner pocket of my scrub top. It rested against my chest, a small solid reminder. That night the rain came back in full, the windows of the ER smeared with water. Red and blue lights from an arriving ambulance streaked across the glass. We were in the middle of a steady run of patients when one of the newer nurses appeared at my side, eyes wide. Room 6, fam, she said. The app says his troponin is normal, but his pain is weird. It is not classic chest pain. It is in his jaw and back, and he looks wrong. The doctor thinks it is anxiety. She looked almost guilty saying it. What do you think, Val? I asked. I think something is off, she said. Then say that, I replied. Out loud, to him, to whoever needs to hear it. You are at the bedside. You see things the rest of us miss. She hesitated, then nodded and turned back toward the room, shoulders set. Across the hall, a monitor beeped in a steady, reassuring pattern. Another spiked and settled. The familiar music of the department rose and fell around us. For a moment, I stood by the nurse's station and felt the weight of the dog tag in my pocket. Metal against fabric, past against present. Outside, the rain hit the glass in countless tiny impacts, each one its own small insistence that the world was still moving. I picked up the next chart and walked into the noise. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.